Croeso and welcome to Day 2 of the 2023 BookTrust Cymru Early Years Partner Conference. I'm Phil Savory, Early Years Engagement Manager at BookTrust Cymru, and this year's theme is supporting fathers to share the benefits of reading for pleasure in the early years. Yesterday, we were joined by Jemima Howell, Head of Training and Development at the Fatherhood Institute, who provided a fascinating look into why this topic is so important. Later today, we'll be hearing from Kelly Maguire and Kate Bauer from BookTrust's Research and Impact and Design and Innovation teams, who will be sharing further findings on the subject. But before that, we have what we hope will be a very informative and insightful panel discussion for you. So I'm now very happy to pass you over to Claire Taylor, who will be introducing the panelists and sharing the discussion. Diolch.
Thanks, Phil. I'd like to welcome our panellists. Thank you for joining us. And before we start our discussion, it would be really lovely for each of you to introduce yourself, let us know what your role is and why supporting fathers to read with children is so important in your work. So starting with Jez, welcome.
Hi, I'm Jez. I'm Head of Training at the Fatherhood Institute. Fathers reading with children is a particular interest to the FI. We have quite strong evidence around that subject, and we enjoy sharing that with services. And we also hold the wonderful Fathers Reading Every Day programme, which is very close to our heart.
Thank you. Deb.
Hi, I'm Deb Thomas. I work for Home Start and I host Dad Matters Cymru. I'm the head lead in the project. The main roles for us within Dad Matters Cymru is to support attachment and bonding and dad's mental health and well-being. So we see reading as part of an important subject for the fathers to do with their children, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Alex.
So my name is Alex Wharton. I'm a poet, a writer, an author, and I'm the current Children's Laureate of Wales. And I'm really passionate about improving the relationship between fathers and children reading. I'm a dad myself, and I always read to my boys. So yeah, I'm here for, trying to get as much information as I can from this, and I hope to share that and encourage, other fathers to read for themselves as well.
Fab, thank you. Kizzy.
Hi, I'm Kizzy Roth. I'm the project manager for Storybook Dads. Storybook Dads is a national charity that help imprisoned parents to record stories for their children. And our goal is to try and help children to feel less anxious about the separation from being away from their parent, but also help the person in prison feel like they can do something valuable from behind bars. So we're here to work with partnerships, and also because we're interested in the impact of reading on wider relationships.
Great, thank you. And Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Jacob. I'm the Assistant Hub Manager for Central Library Hub in Cardiff. I am responsible for the Children's Library within the building, so we do lots of kids events, lots of story times, and I also run a monthly dad's story time just to encourage dads to bring in their young children and pick up that joy of reading, build up confidence with things like nursery rhymes and just sort of spending time with their young kids.
Brilliant, thank you. So just to start with some questions now, over to Jez. Coming back to you, in your keynote yesterday, you said that fathers bring the magic. Is there an impact when fathers read? Are fathers doing it differently?
It's what the evidence would imply. Yeah, so it would imply they have a unique and important influence. And children whose dads read and play and sing with them will show a significant increase in attainment at school. But the magic isn't just about attainment. I think the magic of fathers and children reading is that attainment, but it's also about relationships and father time with children. UK fathers are often quite time poor, so this is an activity you can do really in short, sharp bursts that brings this magic. So it helps children recognise their fathers are interested in them. It helps fathers feel part of that, and this relationship, this, you know, reading cues with each other and laughing, that's where the real magic is. It's not that any man can pick up a book and read to a child and it's going to have the same effect. It is that male parental figure doing it with the child. That's where the key thing is. So yeah, there is evidence that male mother and father involvement may differ, and it may be linked to different outcomes for the child, and that might just reflect different ways that mothers and fathers interact. So there's evidence around fathers playing differently, they use different language, they use abstract language, causal language, and throw in different ideas, whereas mothers may refer more to emotions or labelling. That's shown up in quite a lot of the evidence. So there is this unique impact, and the father behaviour around reading can be significant in how children view reading, how they develop a love of reading, of words, of books, of, you know, that kind of time. So it's, you know, it's not just about, you know, getting to grips with language, it is about learning to love it. I think that's where the magic is.
Lovely, thank you. Deb, you work closely with fathers in your role. When do you think fathers should start reading with their children?
Okay, yeah, because we work with dads through the perinatal stage. When I speak to dads in the antenatal clinics, I reinforce the importance of them already talking to the baby, because the baby's in mum's stomach, but it's so important for that early years relationship that dads are involved. So we say from the set really that dads should have that importance of reading, but it's not so much about the reading, and we emphasize this, it's more about the speaking and talking and hearing the voice. And there is evidence to say at 24 weeks they are fully, you know, their ears have developed, their hearing. So what we say is touching the stomach, talking. And then when the baby comes along, we say it's very important for skin to skin, but for the dad to start talking to the baby. And what dads are really good at is telling stories about their own adventures. And that's like a springboard then from the reading, so that their children have different experiences of stories and what reading and everything else is about. So that's what we find is where it's really important. And if you got where we see maybe some financial difficulties or anything really that might be a barrier, what we say is it's them hearing your voice, listening to what the stories you tell is a really good start and beginning for their relationship with their children.
Thank you.
So we tell them do it straight away. Yes.
So Alex, what did your reading journey look like with your sons? How did you inspire them to read for pleasure?
I always read to my boys. You know, I'm trying to look back now and think back because my boys like 14 and 16. So like, you know, thinking about like, you know, doing the pregnancy and things then, I'm thinking, did I used to read to the boys when they were, you know? And I can't, to be honest, I'd have to think a little bit more about that. I think we did talk to the bump and things. And think, you know, things have changed a lot now with the internet and being more open to things and understanding a bit more about what's going on. But yeah, we read. I always read. I read, I think, before the boys could kind of, you know, read themselves. I taught them to read as well, you know, with the old Biff and Chip and Kipper and things like that.
Yes,
I think, yeah. So like really reading stuff. And we just, yeah, I think it's really nice. Some of the things that I've heard already is about reading, making reading fun, but it is more than reading. It's about communication and togetherness, and you're creating that. It's quite a unique sense of companionship when you go to start reading a story, because you're traveling to this world of imagination, aren't you? A lot of the time, you're stretching your thoughts to somewhere new. So I you know, and I'm looking back now, I'm thinking, wow, you know, wow, how was it when the boys were 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? those were probably our best reading times, you know. I remember reading to the boys. I read to the boys until they told me to stop, basically, which was like, I realized, and they were in comp. And I didn't even know it was, you know, it was a big realization for me. I was like, oh, I'm still reading to them, you know, what kind of, I was shocked. I don't know how long it was going on where they was thinking, are we going to tell dad, you know, you're still going on with these books? And that's fine, you know, maybe there isn't a time to stop, but for us, there was in some sense, and that's okay. But they carried on reading themselves, and, you know, they're just as consumed with the world of, you know, this bombardment of information and things like that, the internet world, as any other teenager now. So I don't see him reading often, which is a shame, but they are 14, 16, you know, my one son's left school, but I did see my son reading just the other day, like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. So it's a completely different world now. But yeah, we read up to comp, and it was very fun. It was our thing. There was a lot of joy in it, and you know, that's what it was about for us.
Fantastic. So kind of taking this journey and how fathers are trying to participate in reading, Craig, we know from research insights that fathers can struggle to participate in story times and activities that share stories with other parents or other caregivers. How have you addressed that lack of opportunity and participation in the work that you're doing in Cardiff Library Hub? And have you heard that fathers have expressed barriers that they've found to their reading journey?
Yeah, as Jez sort of said at the start, UK fathers are time poor, so it is about targeting them, and that often does mean having to put things on the weekends. Most of our kids' events would be sort of mornings after the school drop-off, so mum would take the older one to school, and then they'd come in with the younger one, or that kind of thing. So fathers can't access those services, and often if you're a man going to an event for the first time and you turn up and there's 20 women there, all in little social groups, that can be very intimidating, and especially if you're only on paternity leave, so you've only got a few weeks with your baby. Going to an environment where you don't feel comfortable is very difficult. So setting up a group dedicated for dads was a big start. Getting the information out there to them, when, you know, getting staff to engage with dads and say, hey, look, on Saturdays we do have this for you. And a lot of dads do respond really positively, and they do say, this is the only thing I found that is kind of targeted at me. We get a lot of inquiries for sort of dads and dads groups more generally. So like, can we come along and do something with our kids who are a bit older, 7 or 8? So we've got things like Lego clubs in place now for that. So yeah, there does seem to be within library services maybe a sort of a female target for the younger age things, and it's branching out and trying to make activities that dads will be interested in and the kids are interested in too, and putting those on, and a lot of that is just engaging and getting the feedback and then acting on it.
Great. And are they reflecting that being around other dads is making them feel maybe less self-conscious and more like this space is for them?
Yeah, you see it, especially when you have someone new. When it's a group of dads, they are more quick they come out the shell quicker. So I do think a lot of men are quite anxious when they go to groups for the first time, but when you've got a couple of dads who maybe know each other, and you've got me there who are, you know, going for it, really like trying to be over the top. And I think Deb maybe said it earlier, or Jez said it earlier, men do interact differently when it's a story, or it's like, it's more of a let's have a joke and the rhyme and the story is there, but it's more about interacting around it. Whereas I think when it's mums, I've found it is more pay attention to the story or get the rhyme right, and you know, it's more formulaic and they're more trying to stick to the program. Whereas with the dads, it's a bit more relaxed and chaotic, and I think that's how you kind of bring the dads in as well, because they see fun and they see lots of people interacting that don't really know each other, and I think they feel more comfortable in that. So yeah, it is very much about encouraging. I do find that learning the children and the dad's names and really trying to use people's names does help as well to draw people in. And it's also good for the kids because they're hearing their name, they're hearing their dad's name as well, which is something that kids don't often hear. You know, you often ask like a 2 or 3 year old, what's your mummy's name or what's your daddy's name? And they just say mummy or daddy. They're not really 100% sure sometimes. So yeah, there's a lot of things like that, just little techniques of constantly going back and engaging the parents and the kids, and as you're going around, you know, I like to do some rhymes but also share a story, get one of the book start collections and and have everyone reading a book together, and try and interact with each child and each adult at a different phase of the book. If they've had a particular reaction to say that flap is particularly interesting for that child, be like, oh, you're really enjoying that. So yeah, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of engaging and encouraging the communication. But once dads do come, they do tend to come monthly, which is nice. So they start to network and interact, and they'll stay afterwards and they'll chat as little groups as well, which a lot of the mums do. But when it's sort of a more open group and not a targeted group, if the dads do come, they disappear quicker than the mums. The mums will stay and chat. And a lot of the times, like, you'll get a grandfather who will come with the grandmother, but will then sit at the back and not really engage, and trying to get them in is quite difficult. But I do think having the targeted groups has definitely worked in Cardiff, and I imagine it would work across other parts of the country as well.
Oh, great. Deb, I saw you nodding your head a lot throughout that. Is this a similar reflection of your experience in working with different families, with mothers responding differently to fathers, to different kinds of engagement?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a different approach to dads. Dads are more chilled out. Dads are the ones that lie down on the floor and read a book, and whereas we find with females, mums, they tend to see it more as educational, or it's something that they have to do. It's important, and it's just the same for dads. It's important what they get from it, but it is far more chilled out with their fathers. And it's a lot what you were saying as well about finding the time, Craig, because that can be difficult. But what we do see now is a lot of parents, they got different shift patterns as well. So it's having that opportunity. And what we say is, whether it's 5-10 minutes, it's that little bit of one-to-one, again, communication, engagement with their children. And that's when the bonding and those special little moments and memories begin,
Right. Now that's really interesting, because a lot of services, and we did really touch on this a lot in keynote as well, are reflected on the primary caregiver being the mother. And, even just through using health visiting, it is all very mother focused. So fathers are facing a little bit of, a systems or a services disadvantage. So it's good to be able to target to try and mitigate that. We'll come back to that a little bit later when we think, are there changes that we need to make to support fathers to participate. Coming to you, Kizzy, so the fathers that you are working with are physically absent from their children's lives. What insights do you have on the impact of the Storybook Dads reading programme and how it is supporting fathers, their children and their families?
Yeah, we the men we work with are in prison, so quite often they don't get visits, they don't communicate with their children very often. The families quite often are very far away, they can't have phone calls. So for us, it's such a different experience, because the men in prison, it can be dehumanizing. People don't always want to engage, it's embarrassing, there's lots of barriers already. So I think when we engage with somebody, we start off with talking about their children, trying to learn a little bit about their children, what they might like, what might be interested in. And we find that it's very quick that, just by the process of choosing a book, so they'll come to our department, they'll look through our bookcase, they might have never been read to as a child before themselves, or they might not have ever read to their child themselves, but in the act of engaging with it, they start getting some sort of relationship with the book, and then start talking about their children and opening up, and you sort of see the barrier fall. And then the process of recording can be very, very powerful, and feeling like they're doing something, because I think being in prison and already feeling shame or guilt about being taken away can be quite a big thing. So to be able to feel like they're doing something, and something very meaningful, and sharing a story, and quite often it starts conversations. So then if they do have a call from home, it's something to talk about, and the child says, "Oh, Daddy, I really love that. It was fabulous. It really helped me." And the parents at home, the mother, quite often will let us know that it improved the child's well-being, it improved their behaviour, their sleep. I'll try and find a quote for you that I've got from the family. So one family said it helped to recognise Dad's voice, because he was only a baby when the dad went to prison. So then when they started having phone calls or visits, it helped with the isolation and helped to recognise Dad's voice and what they look like if they do a video story. So I think we see so many elements of it. We see the impact on the father, but we also see the incredible impact on the child. And hopefully, when they get out of prison, they might continue that. You know, they might continue to read and engage with their children.
Fantastic. We're talking quite a bit now about impactful reading programmes. So Jez, the Fatherhood Institute, has the Fred reading programme. Why do you think we need a programme like Fred when there are universal reading programmes?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? My feeling is we need targeted reading programmes because the universal ones fail, and they haven't gone far enough to engage well with fathers. And that doesn't mean to say, you know, let's scrap them all and start again. Sometimes when we have targeted work with fathers, it happens very separately to the work, the core business of the service, which is often with the mother. And that leaves this work we do with fathers quite vulnerable, I think. So ideally, they would be drawn back into core business, being seen as, you know, just part of the family. And we would assess what we are offering to families, whether the programmes are working, whether they're accessing a wide range of parents and carers, and whether they resonate. Now, if they're not resonating, does it mean we have to have separate things for fathers? Well, in the short term, yes, but it doesn't mean we can let everything else off the hook. The other stuff has to have some flexibility, it has to have a bit of transformation, and it has to learn from these targeted reading programmes for fathers like Storybook Dads and Fred and a couple of the others. And what we can learn from that, what we just learned about how to get dads into a library, involved in that, you know, it's so simple. It's that flexibility, but knowing who they are, opportunities to network, you know, just allowing them to be very relaxed. Well, let's take that into the more universal ones. So I think at the moment, we do definitely need targeted reading programmes. Dads aren't getting the message that what they do around reading is important, or that they're that valued in society anyway. So let's do some targeted work. Let's really value it. But let's make sure that feeds into universal provision of any other reading programme, because we can't just have, you know, as much as I love Fred and talking about fathers reading every day, and we've always been huge fans of Storybook Dads, we can't just have those because we're vulnerable. We might go, and then what happens? What happens if the library loses funding for this? It has to stay in universal provision.
I think that brings me on to you, Deb. So just reflecting on what Jez has said, in your work with Home Start, how do you think that we can support dads to engage in services?
I think listening to what you said as well, I think it's a lot bigger than what people realise, in the sense of media has taken over quite a lot. So I feel as well that we're living in, as we all aware, we're living in a very media orientated world, and lots of children are not having the opportunities with the books, because now they're given an iPad or they're given, you know, a phone. And again, it's back to the communication. The communication isn't the same as what it once was, where parents can communicate through playful, you know, when they're using the book. So what we find is, when we go into the homes and we work with the families, demonstrating, you know, I might go in, we might read stories and then demonstrate how easy that was for the parents. They might then imitate this when we're gone, because there's a lot of things that everyone hears, and everyone hears a clear message, but you know, there's a lot of confidence that needs to be built within the families. And there's, like you said earlier, I think it was Jess said, that, you know, the families have come from, perhaps they haven't had that opportunity with the education and the reading. So for us, when we go in, we want to promote and demonstrate that when you sit and do this with your child, this is the outcome then, you know, this is the importance and in that respect.
Great, thank you. I think that I can take what you've just sort of reflected and then kind of ask you, Alex, like what advice would you give about making that reading fun and exciting? So like Deb said, if the families are seeing that children are responding positively to it, they're much more likely to do it themselves. So are there any tips that you have, maybe types of books or methods that you found successful as a dad, but also in your role as laureate, as you are visiting schools and settings and seeing what kind of gets children engaged?
Yeah, where to start, isn't it? You know, there's been so much lovely information from Deb, you know, from everybody. So my brain's tinkling and thinking, right, what do I say on top of that? But you know, the fact is, like, from a parental perspective, as a dad, you know, we add variety. You know, I don't know how we found a load of those books. Like, I was really young. I was like 18 when I became a father, so you know, just almost 19. So I'm, again, like I said, I'm trying to look back at what it was like for me then, and I don't know, you know, perhaps just subconsciously I was picking up the books and reading to the boys, and like I said, we had a lot of fun with that. So diversity in the books, you know, I think that's one thing to think about when you're trying to make reading fun. And you know, if the children are enjoying books at home, hold the story back every now and again. Say, well, we're not going to read that one, you know, tonight. Well, we'll read that one tomorrow night, and just build up a bit of suspense for the books, you know. Character, and again, that comes with confidence. But what I would say about that is, it's like anything. Practice. Don't be afraid to practice, even when your children are not around. Try reading the book out loud and just think about the voices. The fact is, like, I was just thinking about my partner, what she would say. She would say, you know, I'm not very confident reading. I don't like to read to the boys. You know, you do it, kind of thing. Which I was happy to do it anyway. Looking back, obviously in the evenings I used to work kind of full time. Sometimes I'd be working 7 days a week. So this was a lot of the time, looking back, this was our evening thing. This was bedtime reading. This was bedtime stuff. But she wouldn't say she'd have the confidence. But what I'd say to people there is just, like I said, practice. Familiarize yourself with the book. Read it out loud. And actually, don't worry too much. Don't place so much, like Deb said earlier, about it being, you know, education and all of this. Of course it is, but it's explorative. We're supposed to have fun with language. It's ours, you know. We own the language anyway. It's how we communicate with each other. So trying new voices. If you read a novel, when you know, I don't know, when Hagrid pops up in Harry Potter or something, you know, I used to be like trying to speak like Hagrid, but the fact is, you're not going to get it right. You're not always going. And then next, you know, sometimes you don't know, and you switch back to Hermione or whatever, and just remembering it used to be a good laugh. But the fact is, the joy is in the attempt in that. You're not going to get it right. You don't have to be a professional storyteller. You just have to be dad or mum or whoever you are. Read it, you know, whatever kind of guardian you are, reading to the child. So just have fun with it. Don't place too much. You know, don't place too much responsibility around it. Have fun. Also, get the children to read as well. We would always read like a few pages each, and they would look forward to having a go at those characters. And sometimes let the child kind of take over, if they, especially when they're, you know, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Let them say, I can't really do that. Actually, do you want to take over this part? Because I can't do that. And give them some responsibility. They'll enjoy that as well. But just quickly, you know, thinking about being an author, my work then as an author and laureate and everything, I've been visiting hundreds of schools, thousands of children for years now, all around the country. And it's funny because I'm thinking about boys when I'm reading to the boys. I don't differentiate from anybody. You know, I perform to everybody, and I try and encourage and stir a lovely kind of positive connection to language and literature. But when I think about boys, often and I'm doing like writing workshops, it's so often, which is sad sometimes, but teachers often say, oh, you know, don't worry about so-and-so at the back. Don't worry about Tom at the back or whatever. He, you know, he probably won't join in. He's a bit of a rugby lad, and he's not really into kind of poetry and stuff. So don't worry about him. But you know, everyone else will probably enjoy it. And I always just take that. I love that when I hear that. Well, I don't like to hear that, but I know that kid will probably be the one who participates the most. And so much. So it's like just reminding, you know, I'm thinking about when I'm reading to these children, these boys, well, they're going to become fathers. And what, if I can do anything as an author, is show them that language is theirs, language is playful, and it's how we communicate. So it's about joy. But when teaching, making up stories as well. So having your say, navigating your own path. As a family, as a dad, and this is something that I do as a writer, but yeah, don't be afraid to just make up some stories, just have fun with it, see where it goes. A collaborative thing. You start and we'll all carry on. And if it ends up, it just dissolves and turns into something awful, that's fine. Start again, or just get into a picture book or whatever. But yeah, I think you have to take ownership of your own like reading time. It's okay. It will be different to other people's.
Kizzy, I can see you've got your hand.
Yeah. I was just interested to add to what Alex said about humour and having fun, you know, because I think for us, prison's got a huge amount of humour, and I think sometimes the guys come down to us and they sort of feel like, oh, this is going to be really serious, and they're sweating, they're really nervous about the whole experience, and then actually, I think choosing a funny book immediately breaks the ice, and then being able to have fun with it while reading, and then the child laughs at that, you know, things, you know, one's about farting, and they all normally the go-to books, you know, because they make the dads laugh and they enjoy it more, and then it makes the child laugh because they see that their dad's laughing, and it kind of has a really lovely symbiotic sort of relationship. And also dressing up, we get guys that dress up, you know, like I can remember one guy in I don't even know which prison it was, but he made his own costume out of curtains from his cell. It was a superworm, I think it was. So he made a little bandana and a little cape, and just things like that just really, you know, add to it. I think it can be really just fun, just really fun.
That's right. I think it's making it your own, isn't it? Not placing, like I said, too much responsibility, but have fun. Just understand your own accent, your own dialect, and just make it your own. Because these characters, we find ourselves within these characters. A lot of time we talk about representation and things in books, which is obviously hugely important. But also, you might be, most likely, you're going to be represented in the personality of the character. The child will find themselves in the even if they don't see themselves, or, you know, black, or if they don't see a disabled character. We need all of this, of course, in good representation, but you can also remind the child to see themselves in the personality of the character, you know. And I think that's another nice thing, just reminding that this is what it's all about, and it stirs empathy and compassion in us, and it gives us a sense of, you know, seeing the world from someone else's perspective. So there's so much to come from this, as we all know. But yes, dads, encouraging, especially from the dad's perspective, just joy. And that's what I get through being an author as well, and visiting schools, putting on a big assembly. Like, I know through my experience, I wouldn't start and read a poem about, like, I have some poems about social kind of aspects, like homelessness, for example. There's a poem in my book, Daydreams and Jelly Beans, about homelessness. But I would never start with that, you know. I know how important the joy is, and that's for everybody. That's kind of universal. You have a bit of fun, have a splash of joy and fun and collaboration, which is all the things you can do when you read at home. When I'm reading to like 900 children, that's really just you reading to your child. It's exactly the same. Start with a bit of fun, a sense of joy, and then maybe leading, like you say, you know, meander into some other things. Maybe let's have a look at this, but what's this about? Oh, someone's lost someone. I don't know, wherever it is, whatever you feel is necessary. But joy is definitely a big one for me. I have to use that. I have to have a lot of fun before I can start talking about, I might talk about, you know, nature, biodiversity loss, whatever it is that the school might have asked, or I feel would be good to talk about that day. But it always starts with fun. It's just the best way to hook the imagination and let them feel like, you know, this is a fluid thing.
Absolutely. Deb, you've got your hand up. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we work with families, we have quite a lot of neurodiversity. So again, we learn with our senses. So we talk a lot about reading and using our eyes, but there's a lot of other sensories that we can use as well for children. So what we tend to do, we use crafts, and through the crafts you make the books. So if a child prefers to do something and visually they communicate, we find these books are a good way as well for the dads. And plus, again, it's back to the chilling, relaxing. And once you relax, you get creative. So it sort of falls into the overall development of the child. And back to the most important thing. And yes, it's good to read, but it's good to listen. So we also say, well, listen to your child. You know, what are they got cues just the same as you have. And then that's where the connections are made then, you know, and that's when they start to fill this relationship and talk about everything. And then everything just falls into place.
Fantastic. Jazz, do you find that humour is an important element of Fred?
Well, Fred, dads and children can pick up anything they want to read at all, anything, menus, IKEA instructions, bus timetables, but they are still choosing to pick up books, which is lovely. And I think that hasn't actually changed in the last 15 years. So it's not that they're moving into apps or anything. But one of the top tips is find something you're both interested in and expand on it. So if you're reading to your 4-week-old baby, but you're interested in Land Rovers, read the Land Rover magazine. Any kind of communication's excellent. And then it is about getting over your own personal hurdles around reading if they exist. And loads of wonderful things like that dads tend to do in the research it's shown, because they're using more abstract ideas with reading. They will see a ladder in a story and say, oh, that reminds me about the last time I went up a ladder. Let me tell you about it. And my mate was holding it and it was shaking, and it leads into other things. So yeah, very often dads are stereotyped as the fun parent. But there is quite a lot of good to come from having a right old laugh with your dad. You know, it's such a bonding thing. And dads do that kind of extension, and they do a bit more rough and tumble where they roll around laughing, and they get such an oxytocin boost from it, and so do their children, that it's addictive. Why would you not want to keep coming back? And that kind of triangle between the dad and the book and the child, and how all those things interact, that's where the magic is, I think. And absolutely, now we've got books that can make you roar with laughter. You know, I had Janet and John books. There wasn't one thing to laugh about in those books. My daughter's dad moved in with me with one book, and it was a Haynes motor manual for a car he didn't own anymore. And when we had our baby, suddenly he got favourite books. Suddenly there were bookshelves full of favourite books that made him laugh. And when our daughter was about 3, she heard him tiptoeing out the bedroom, and she said, from her favourite book, "Where are you going to, little brown mouse?" And it was like, oh, this is wonderful. And then, yeah, bedtime was ruined again. They were back in bed having another read of the Gruffalo. Reading, I think, sometimes has such a kind of stuffy, kind of, oh, you need to learn to read and you need to do it by this age and then you'll get tested on it. The best way to learn anything is just to have a right good riot with it, I think.
Absolutely. And to sort of reflect on what you were saying about literacy and perhaps personal hurdles, I just want to bring in Kizzy, because we know that there are lower levels of literacy for fathers who are in prison. An issue with your programme, and how are you supporting those fathers?
Yeah, they sort of say that the average reading age for a prisoner is 11, and there's quite often very low literacy levels and low sort of engaging with reading generally, sort of going back in families, and we see that quite a lot. So, I mean, we ask all participants to give us feedback, and about 25% of prisoners that work with us say that they were never read to as a child. And then about the same number of families that receive discs say that their absent dad never read to them when they were at home. So we find there's a correlation between that. But we do refer to the Shannon Trust, which is an organisation that helps prisoners learn to read. So we work with the Shannon Trust and try and engage dads in prison, if they can't read, to learn to read, but for a really good purpose. You know, they're not just learning for, I don't know, education's sake, because they don't want to engage with education, but they are actually learning because they really want to read to their own child and they've never been able to do it before. So we have lots of strategies. We also do assisted reads. So they might come to us, we might read a line and then they copy it and we edit our voice out. But ultimately, that doesn't teach them to read. So ultimately, what we want to do then is sort of say, look, that was really good. Your child loved that. So why don't you now engage with the Shannon Trust? And we'll come with you. We'll introduce you. And the Shannon Trust have some of our books so that it's a sort of an in to do it for their child. I can't think of it. Yeah, I can't think of it.
No, I know it's really interesting. I really like the point that you made about maybe reading isn't for them, but they're motivated to read for them.
Yeah, we get a lot.
So much impact, doesn't it? And a really different approach.
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback from the Shannon Trust, and the Shannon Trust, you know, it's I mean, I know I don't work for the Shannon Trust, but they are a great organisation because it's prisoner led. So, you know, a lot of prisoners don't want to engage with English or sort of formal education in prison. It's quite a difficult thing. They might not have engaged in education in their life generally, and then to be in prison and be forced to learn English or to go through those steps. So the Shannon Trust, you know, it's a prisoner teaching a prisoner. So it already takes away all those barriers of, I don't like education, I don't want to be in a classroom, I don't want to be in front of somebody, I don't want to go through all those hoops. So to sit in an environment with just one person and you learn a program together and you feel trust, and then to slowly branch that out to, yes, I can read to my child now, or I can fill out forms when I get out of prison, or it sort of has an expansive sort of thing, which is, it's great. And we get a lot of good feedback from the Shannon Trust of prisoners wanting to engage with the Shannon Trust in order to read to their children. So we hope that we're trying to do more work with them for that reason as well.
Definitely. And that's such an interesting journey for that prisoner and that father as well. It's benefiting them and benefiting their family. So it's definitely a two-way thing. That's really interesting. I wanted to come back to you, Craig, because I think it's something that has been touched on by a few, and it's something that we see in our work with libraries, is that our libraries working against the stereotype view about reading and books. Is that still a thing that you're experiencing? And how do you support this idea of bringing joy so that reading is seen as fun and it's for everyone?
I do think that if someone hasn't been in a library for a long time, they hold that view. But I think when most people come into libraries, especially sort of the big city centre ones, or the large central ones, you know, like Penarth or Swansea Central, they are so much more than a library used to be. There are so many more services. You will have spaces for musical instruments, you will have spaces for other advice services or help with digital inclusion, things like that. So I think that idea that you're going to go into a library, you're going to get shushed and it's going to be a very austere environment, that is something we're still trying to shift. You do still get parents that come in and say, oh, don't make too much noise. And we're like, no, you can, you know, as long as you're not being completely disruptive, you can make as much noise as you need to make. If you want to have fun and laugh and read a book out loud, that's fine, you carry on. So yeah, it's kind of breaking those stereotypes still. We are still struggling with that. We don't have quiet sessions. We have lots of noisy, loud sessions, and we, you know, encourage people to stick around afterwards and read. And we don't shush, and we try not to say no and things like that, as if we can, as long as it's as encouraging people to read and engage. So yeah, and people will come in and will do things that they would never have expected to do in a library. So like over the summer reading challenge, we did a sports day in the park and things like that. So there's lots of things that we're doing to bring people in a joyful way, and then link it back to the reading, and then make the reading joyful by helping people pick fun books, displaying titles that staff have read that they found interesting or funny. Definitely.
Fantastic discussion. I wanted to close just by asking each of you the same sort of question, which is really, what can be done to support fathers reading in the early years from a service and organisation perspective? Do we need to change our approach? Are there tips or guidance that we can give to our audience? So I'll start with you, Jez, because I know that you feel really strongly about this, and that do we need to change our approach so with the service provision to support fathers?
Absolutely, we do. We need to see fathers as core business. From now on, this is the line in the sand. We can't. They are not additional to the work we do with mothers. They are absolute core business. They are key players. They are huge resources for their children, and they really deserve to be seen and supported where needed. Which leads me on to the next thing. Fathers are already doing this. Fathers are already reading. They're already playing. They're already parenting without much out there to tell them of the value of that. Now imagine what would happen if they felt fully supported, had loads of information, if all family services engaged with them. So we need to build on what they're already doing, and it is services' responsibility for that. We need to really delve into the life of Dad, put his shoes on, feel what it might feel like to walk in the door. What would it be like to be him trying to access our services? And where things need shifting, shift them. This is about equality of access to services. This isn't about, you know, some kind of creation of super dads. This is supporting parents because it really matters to children. There have been so many examples in this discussion of really good practice, you know, flexibility, knowing who they are, all of that really boils down to seeing them as core business. And once we've got that, then you do the little steps. But unless we get our line in the sand and say, right, how many dads are we seeing? Where are we seeing them? What do they think about our services? Then, you know, we can't really move on without doing this kind of reflective work on how services engage well with dads. But we have to come at this with a view that they are absolutely already doing it and probably smashing it without any support. So let's not think we have to work with dads to get them to do stuff they're not doing, or we need to work with dads so they read with their children. The vast majority already are. They might need some top tips. They might need a bit of help, you know, because they're not getting the messages out there. But yeah, be really careful that we're not using things like we need to get dads involved. You know, it's so patronising. We wouldn't do that to mothers. And it builds on stereotypes of this idea of dads just being a bit of a deficit parent. But they're not. You ask their children. To their children, they're not deficit at all. So yeah, absolutely. Give them the respect they deserve for the stuff they're doing and the support they deserve for the stuff they would like to do.
Fantastic. I'm going to put people on the spot now with their tips and advice. So, Alex, what tips or advice would you give practitioners or teachers or other authors and storytellers to make fathers feel more seen for the work that they're doing?
Yeah, so coming from a slightly different perspective, it made me think, I think, you know, the last time we were speaking together, I was just thinking about this, and well, I went off and wrote about 3 or 4 books then, just about ordinary things, you know, things that I, you know, I started simplifying it and thinking, well, what else I could have read to the, you know, to my boys at the time. I come from a trade background, so I was probably, when they were younger, I was plastering, building, and I was in construction for most of my, you know, for like 12 years until I started writing and enjoying writing, and the book was doing well, and then I left. So that's what I've always been in, really, construction. So, you know, I started writing a little story about a plasterer and an electrician, and, you know, my friends, all my friends are builders, pretty much most of my friends that I've grown up with are builders, rugby playing kind of guys. And I know what it's like. I know what this kind of whole idea is like. But I think it was lovely to hear that then, that most guys are doing it. Yeah, it's true. They probably are. Like I said, I was 18 and I just got on with it. I wasn't handed the kind of the books or anything like, obviously my partner would have been antenatal or those kind of things, of course. But I would have just picked it up in probably a creative way and just kind of, and just done it. So yeah, the kind of support I think that would be necessary, or, you know, the way I'm looking at it is just probably about the diversity in books, finding books that dads might think, oh, look at this, that's a good crack, you know, what's this all about? And just going from there and maybe feeling a sense of familiarization with the book. Of course, we have all this imagination and we love to all the kind of, you know, monsters and dragons and everything else. That really makes for good, fun story time and charismatic. But sometimes just maybe a story about a plasterer. This is what he does, or whatever, you know, I'm saying whatever, but it's made me think about, from the writing perspective, what can I do to contribute to this? How can I make maybe a few books that really feel like I know that story? That's my story. That's what I did. So that's just something that I've been thinking about. And if anyone can kind of help me in that, or if there's any support around that, I know the publishing world and everything is kind of slow and tricky. And I've got a few books kind of on the way, poetry especially, because I love as well. I would definitely encourage poetry. And the Gruffalo and those picture books, they are rhyming. So there's poetry, but it's funny with poetry because it kind of just dips off then. After picture books, it's like, oh, poetry doesn't exist or something. Very strange. But it's accessible, it's rhythmic, it's fluid, and it allows you to just get a bit of musicality into the writing. you know, a sense of rhythm and all of that. And I think that everybody loves that. So that's why books like The Gruffalo and things work well, because we can kind of almost imagine what's coming next. We're lulled into this sense of rhythm, and I don't think that goes away from children. You know, they always want. Sometimes the whole rhyme thing can constrain us. Oh, I can't rhyme when children are writing themselves. But the fact is, for the most part, you know, it's like our heartbeat. We move to beats, and when you create poetry, things that kind of find this sense, these walking beats, these walking and breathing rhythms, it's just natural to us. So whether we're good at doing that or not, you know, I think poetry is definitely a good thing to explore, and a lot of time it gets forgotten about.
I think that's really, really important, and it's maybe one to pin, is you don't have to be good at this.
You don't have to be good at it, no. Have fun with it. And the fact is, like I said, you might not start good at it, you might become amazing at it. Like I said, well, look, the proof is in the pudding. I'm a plasterer who's become a Children's Laureate of Wales. You know, I wasn't this when I was 19, you know, maybe I was, but I don't think I was. This has come through experience, and this has just come through giving stuff a go and not being afraid to get things wrong, because in creativity, there is no wrong. You know, it's yours to express yourself. And when they consume books, ideas, and stories, it's not long until they start kind of spilling their own out. So this is a two-way thing, you know. It's not just about the reading; it's the writing and the writing and the reading. It's all part of it. It's finding our own story as well, isn't it? So yeah, that's really what I would say about that.
That's really
it's exciting. It's been really exciting to hear all of this. Made me think a bit about my own journey as well. As a dad and as somebody who reads, but I would just hope that, I hope as well, when people see me, I know that when I go to schools, people see me and sometimes they're surprised. Sometimes they're surprised in the way I perform or sing and do all of this and that. And I hope that people can see themselves in me, dads, whoever, because I go to a lot of libraries as well over the UK, and I've supported very well. I've just thinking about, when he was talking about the Welsh libraries, I was thinking I was just up in Bolton at some libraries the other week, and I was up in Nottingham like a week before, and they're amazing. Libraries are just doing incredible things. You know, there's people in there like weighing, you know, you can go and weigh children and things in libraries, and I don't know, all sorts of mad things that I didn't know, and I definitely wouldn't have known whilst I was out on a building site of any given Saturday or Sunday. So it's like, yes, just reminding people, and just maybe just tooting a little horn to say this goes on in the library as well. You know, come down, have a fun story time, get involved. You don't have to get it right. You just have to be there, contribute. By next week, you'll probably have a little bit more to say anyway. You know, that's how these things go. We develop.
Oh, I totally agree. And I'm just going to back that over to Craig now, because we've just been bigging up the libraries again, which we must do all the time. That's our mission. Rhyme times and rhyming. Are there any tips or advice that you could give to other practitioners who are maybe a little bit shy or nervous about engaging families with rhyming? I know I have seen pictures of you, Craig, dressed as a wolf. I know you've got it in you. What advice would you give to our audience about engaging all families, and particularly if there's anything that you have in your toolbox for making it fun for fathers to feel seen and appreciated?
I think practically for sort of practitioners, start small, practice a few rhymes and get some props. Props are like, they're like a safety blanket to a certain extent. So, you know, if you're going to do Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, get a starry blanket and wave it. If you want to do the wheels on the bus, have a bus, or have something to distract, and it's almost to distract yourself from what you're doing, because a lot of people do get a bit of sort of stage fright and performance anxiety, so it's understandable. Find a silly book, and especially if it's your first sort of few times, find a silly repetitive book. Like Alex said, rhyming really works. Like Shoo, I don't like you, go back to the zoo, because you've got that repetitive page and you can get the kids to say it back to you and it's engaging. Something like wee wee poo poo bum bum, it's a toilet training one, but it's also very funny, and you get that repetitive thing that kids like to say. They go away singing it every time I do it. So yeah, I would say find something funny, find something repetitive. For a practitioner, for sort of parents and dads, I mean, I make a mistake every single book I read because I'm reading them backwards and upside down, and you just roll with it, and you just hope that it wasn't inappropriately, change the context of the sentence. But yeah, that I just think it is building confidence, and like Jez said, a lot of dads are probably doing it at home or privately by themselves, and then maybe just struggling with networking and getting into an institutional setting like a library to get some advice and get that reassurance that, yeah, no, you keep reading the Gruffalo 14 times if that's what your kid likes. That's absolutely fine. So yeah, I think confidence, building confidence and networking and getting the information out there that what you're doing is probably right, and if you want some help and you want to do it a bit in a different way, then come and speak to us and engage with your local library service, because you will find someone that's passionate and wants to help you. Claire, sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm just talking to myself. Kizzy, when we spoke previously, we had a really interesting discussion that I think would be nice for the group and for the audience about voice. And particularly now, you know, we're all here, you can see our faces, you can see our voices. What is it that's so special about voice that you're doing and in general?
Yeah, we work in 100 prisons, and about 90% of them only record using a voice recorder. So that sense of voice and your identity it's so powerful, and we find that it's undistracted. You know, that if a child's listening to just their dad's voice, whether it's headphones or on a laptop, there's something just so, you just get lost in it. And I think there's no distraction, and you're just concentrating on that special moment. And we find that it's just really, really, really powerful. We do offer video storybook dads where you can see the dad as well as hear the voice, but we find that the audio recordings have just got something extra special. And I don't know if that goes back to moments when the child's much younger and you're sort of learning the voice, but there's something really you just can't forget it. You know, I can always remember my dad's voice, and I think there's always something there that's just really, really powerful. So we like to encourage, especially for very young children, for dads to do an audio recording, and also for we have dads that do recordings for their partners who are pregnant, so they haven't had the child yet, and they do that, and they're played to in the womb. And I know Deb was mentioning that, so that we'd like to encourage that, and for, you know, regularly, sort of monthly, they would do that as well with us. But I think that it's hard to describe what it is that makes it so powerful, but I think the voice is very powerful. When you strip everything away and you've just got someone's voice, I think it's incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. And it'd be interesting when, like, we don't generally just speak on the phone anymore. So it is interesting that you are championing the voice, and there's so much that we can learn about active.
Yeah.
And it is something that we promote a lot in BookTrust Cymru, particularly because we are promoting bilingualism, and we recognise that all the books we produce are bilingual, but a lot of people who are reading at home with their children are not Welsh speakers, and maybe Welsh learners, and maybe in different places in their journey with Welsh, but we would always provide audio of the Welsh, and it just provides that completely different experience of just hearing the words and hearing someone's voice, and that connection is quite different. So yeah. And
I think I think we talked yesterday, didn't we, about somebody that we work with in prison whose daughter was about 6 months old, I think, when he went to prison, and he sort of said he didn't want to do storybook dads. He sort of said, no, I don't think they'll appreciate it. It's embarrassing. I don't want to do it. And he did it, and he did it over a period of months. And now she recognises his voice on the phone. She's never visited him because it's too far away, but she recognises his voice and she calls him daddy. And I think there's an element of that recognition and growing up, even if they're separate. I think it's the voice is just such an incredible thing, and we champion it very much. Yeah,
absolutely. It's so powerful. And finally, speaking about voice, actually returning to you, Deb, and what you said at the start about speaking to the bump and the very beginning journey of reading and connecting with your voice. What piece of advice would you give to practitioners who are listening about being fully inclusive of fathers from the beginning, really the first stages of fatherhood?
Yeah, I think that's where quite a lot of the barriers are, and that's what we try to do, is raise awareness, and sort of say to them they're equal. And I think what Jess said was really important. Men are doing it; they're already doing it. And when you're talking about things like this, you're not trying to sort of create something or identify anything in why males are not doing this, because they are, but it's promoting the positives and using what we're already got and raising awareness out there that yes, dads are funny, dads bring so much, but equally mums do. So it's about bringing the parents together and balancing it out. And with the both, you've got perfect opportunities for children to learn. So for me, it's listen to the dads.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been really, really interesting, and it's an important discussion. And as Jez says, we can move forward from here. And everybody listening, please do share this recording with your colleagues and start thinking about what you're doing in your setting, in your practice, that is making sure that fathers are seen for their role and their contributions. So plenty of extra work to be done, but important work that reflects the reality of children and families' lives. So we will share the links to each of our panelist organisations with you so you can follow them and support their work. Next up, we have an update from our colleagues in Research and Impact and Design and Innovation, who will be sharing what BookTrust has been learning this year and how we are putting that into practice. So over to you, Kelly, and thank you.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm Kelly from the Research and Impact team at BookTrust.
And I'm Kate from the Design and Innovation team. Today we're going to talk to you about how we design our programmes and learn at BookTrust, what we've learned recently about reading in the early years, and specifically what we've learned about reading and dads and implications for the benefits of reading, and finally share some links about how you can find out more on our work.
So we thought we'd start by giving you a flavour of how we learn and design our programmes at BookTrust. And the main thing to say is that we are a learning organisation, and we do put evidence and also our partners and families at the heart of everything we do. So we start with our strategy, which sets out on our ambition to bring the benefits of reading to a whole host of children, particularly those in the greatest need, to achieve that long-lasting change that we want to see with children making reading a part of their lives. As I said, everything is informed by the latest external evidence and thinking on how to form habits and how to encourage children to get into reading. So we start with our design and development approach, and that is again informed by external evidence and our wealth of knowledge on early years shared reading. And it's also, we really make sure that we involve families and partners in that design process as well. So our evaluation approach and the learning that we do, again, families and partners right at the heart of that. And it's really linked to our design and development approach. So the things that we design for, we know to look out for when we're seeing how the programmes are working in practice. So we take what we've learned and put it into action when our programmes get delivered. And we're really just interested in a continuing cycle of improvement to see what we can learn from our partners and families, and refining our offers as we go. So we thought it might be useful just to give a bit of an example to put some of this into some context. So on our recent early years offers, which is Book Start 1 to 2 years and Book Start 3 to 4 years, the first year we've just finished delivery on, which is really exciting. And when we were designing that, the external evidence was really clear that providing multiple ways into stories and reframing reading as something that was fun and exciting was really important. So we designed the packs with that in mind. We put in accompanying activities and resources and asked partners to talk to parents about the different ways that they could read books and share stories if they felt able to. And with that in mind, we knew what to look out for in the evaluation, and we were really pleased to see that 99% of families were excited to open the pack and find out what was inside, and 98% said that they really enjoyed using them.
Over the past year, we have been continuing our work to understand the needs of families who need most support to develop a shared reading habit across their early years. We've done some ethnographic research with families, we've done large-scale family surveys and had conversations with our early years partners, and we've gained a better understanding of the day-to-day priorities and pain points for these families and where reading might fit into their lives. Before talking through what that means for how we have developed our early years reading journey, I just wanted to highlight a few of our key findings. So we know that most families see reading with their children as important. 95% of parents and carers who completed our family survey in 2022 said that they see reading as important for their child. But many face barriers to doing so, including their own reading ability and confidence, and potentially previous negative experiences that can mean they lack confidence in reading. Having multiple priorities, so priorities around work, around other children, other stresses and activities may take precedence. A perception that their child might not be enjoying reading, especially if they wander off and can't sit still. And also we found that 1 in 5 parents lack confidence in choosing books for their children. And what we know is important to help families engage is providing multiple joined up moments across the early years to engage with our offers, providing different ways into stories and ways of engaging with books and stories, creating experiences for families and children beyond the books themselves, and also reframing shared reading as something fun, engaging, and interactive. Now I'm just going to touch on what we know about dads and early shared reading. So we know that more mums read than dads. We found that 95% of mothers and 67% of fathers engage in regular reading with their child. Dads let their imagination run wild. 53% of dads prefer making up stories to reading books with their children. Dads are often less confident than mums. They're twice as likely to lack confidence choosing books for their children and lack confidence in their own reading ability. And finally, but they do love sharing stories. When they do read with their children, the majority of dads find it a rewarding and enjoyable experience.
So we know that early shared reading brings a whole host of benefits, particularly for children from the lowest income households. And recently we produced an interactive benefits of reading resource, which we were really pleased to see had lots of positive feedback from our partners. But the one thing that we kept being asked for was knowing the benefits is really great, but how do we achieve them? What are the key things that lead to those benefits? So we had a look at the external evidence and spoke to partners and looked at what we knew internally. And found 3 key ingredients to bringing about the benefits of reading and wanted to share those today. The first thing to say, though, is really, as you'll know, there is no right or wrong way to read a story, which is the first thing to emphasise with parents and carers and other adults. But really focusing on these 3 key things are what bring about those benefits. So the first one is ensuring physical closeness and shared attention. So carving out that unhurried reading time creates a perfect space for bonding and attachment relationships to form. The second one is making sure it's an enjoyable experience. So when a child sees an adult getting really involved, being silly, enjoying the story, they'll enjoy it too. And the third one is making sure there's plenty of interaction. So not having a passive reading experience, but involving the child as much as possible, no matter how old they are, and trying to get them involved and enjoy the story as well. And these 3 things together really help to establish those strong, nurturing relationships, supports emotional development, and actually helps lots of skills to develop as well, such as communication and fine motor skills. And we found actually that early shared reading, it can yield benefits from as young as 2 weeks. So there really is no time that's too early to start.
And finally, we just wanted to finish up by saying we're continuing to evaluate our programmes, and we will share what we've learned. We really do value your feedback, so please do keep completing all of our surveys and taking the time to talk to us and share your experiences. We've provided here some links to find out more about our recent work, including findings from our early years programmes, research that we've done into the benefits of reading, and also links to some of our early years briefing notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Kate. That was really interesting, as was the panel discussion, also yesterday's keynote. I really hope that all who have joined us over the last 2 days for these webinars have found them informative and even inspiring. I know that I have. I also hope that the theme of supporting fathers to share the benefits of reading for pleasure in the early years has helped you reflect on your own practice and whether anything more can be done to engage with fathers around this topic. Recording of the webinars will be made available soon, and I'd encourage you to share them with colleagues and anyone who you feel would gain from viewing them. I'd like to thank all of our contributors for providing their expertise on the subject. And lastly, I'd like to thank all who have joined us for these webinars. The partner organisations that support our work is so important to us, and we really appreciate all you do in delivering BookTrust Cymru messages, books and resources to families throughout Wales. We couldn't do this without you. Diolch yn fawr, and thank you.